Hello, fellow cemetery explorers. Right now we're pulling into Oakwood Cemetery in Beloit, Wisconsin, and there are some really interesting historic grave sites here that we're going to take a look at. But more importantly, this is just a really old cemetery with some really interesting headstones. So let's go take a look. This place has been around for years and years and years. I mean, since probably the mid 1800s. And there's some things that have fallen into a little bit of disrepair, like this stone here. Looks like it fell over somewhere and somebody picked it up and kind of put it on its side against a tree, which is something that you don't see every day. But this is just a really interesting historic place, and there's notably two historic figures here with some interesting ties that I'll tell you about in just a bit. There was a big walnut that just fell behind me. It just missed hitting my squash. But this is one of the neat things about visiting cemeteries, is that you learn a lot of things about history and people that have done some kind of interesting things in time. Looks like here's another tombstone here that broke in half. It's always sad to see. It looks like this one was glued back together at one point. This plot here looks pretty old and I guess Halloween-y for the season. There's some markers there that show that this one was a Civil War veteran. Lewis Crane, Lieutenant Colonel, 3rd Wisconsin Infantry, July 7th, 1826 to August 9th, 1862. So he must have passed during the Civil War. As you can see, this fence is fallen into some disrepair also. Margaret Steele and Laura Crane Kenyon. Now it is kind of a rainy, gloomy morning today, and it definitely feels like fall. There's leaves on the ground. But one of the first people that I want to show you here was a man that is pretty known here in this part of Wisconsin. He was an explorer, and he was somebody that's thought to have been the inspiration for the film Indiana Jones. Now, Harrison Ford played Indiana Jones famously, and nobody has ever actually come out and said it, but a lot of historians and researchers seem to think that it's based off of this guy's life. And he had a really interesting life. He was from here, and he ended up exploring the world. He found some of the first ever dinosaur eggs. He wrote several books, and he was a scholar in his field. But that man is right here, Roy Chapman Andrews. 1884 to 1960, he passed away in California, grew up here. But he started doing taxidermy when he was a kid and started saving his money so that he could go to school. And he wanted to explore. He wanted to start adding specimens to collections, and he found some really interesting things. But it's a very fascinating story if you don't know much about him. I highly recommend looking him up. There's a lot of information about him out there, but it's a really fascinating story. But whether or not he was the inspiration for Indiana Jones, nobody has ever come out and said it, but researchers and a lot of people in his field seem to think that it makes perfect sense. Now, for you cemetery lovers, how often do you walk through a cemetery and suddenly think, I have to go to the bathroom, but there's really nowhere to go? They have a porta potty here, which is half gross, but also kind of nice to see. Now, one of the most interesting people in this cemetery, at least to me, because I'm a history nerd, is a man by the name of Albert Wurz. And that name may not ring a bell to you, but the part that ties him to history definitely would. Now, he passed away in 1912, and he was on board a ship called Titanic. And he was one of the unfortunate souls that did not escape from the ship. And he is laid to rest here. And he came from Switzerland. He moved over to Beloit, Wisconsin when he was a teenager. And he was looking for work. And his aunt had a job for him over here. And as you can see, it is labeled here, the Ship of Dreams, Titanic. And they actually used to have a Titanic buoy over here, and I'm not sure where that went. But this is Albert Wurz. Now, he was discovered, I believe, his body was discovered about 10 days after Titanic sunk. And he was body number, I want to say 152 or something like that. It's been a little bit since I actually did the research, but he was, he was a young guy looking to start his life over here in America and passed away very, very early on. Now, his grave was unmarked for a lot of years, and then I believe the Titanic Society and the Beloit Chamber of Commerce teamed up and got him this headstone here. And it's usually marked with something. But last time I was here, it had the Titanic buoy. Today they have the Titanic flag. But it's interesting because there's not a lot of people that were on board the Titanic that are buried in the United States. Most of them are, I believe, in Nova Scotia. But very interesting. I'm kind of glad we did this video when we did. It's starting to rain now. But this is a very interesting and classic nice historic cemetery here. It's a little chilly now. But I would also like to remind you that when you're visiting cemeteries, please be respectful. Don't take anything. Don't trash anything. Don't tip over anything. Leave things as they are. And also be cautious about walking directly over graves. I try to, step over things the best that I can. But this is a really interesting place. But I think I'm going to call it for now. The rain's getting a little bit heavier. It might not be easy to see. But I will come back here and do a part 2 because there are a lot of other really interesting people here. Politicians, war veterans. They have sections from each war. They have a Civil War section, World War I, World War II. A lot more interesting stuff, but I will come back and do a part 2. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll catch you on the next cemetery exploration. Take care.